Hello, everybody. It looks like my mic is working this time. Let me know if you can't hear me or the sync seems really off or any one of the other numerous technical problems that we usually enjoy on this program. Hi, Rings. Hi, Francis, Quindy. I hope you're all having a good day. Quindy says it sounds good. I hope it sounds good for everyone else as well. So I'm going to do something a little bit different today, something I probably haven't done since, I don't know, 2010, 2012. I mean, I've done a bit since then. But I'm going to do some sculpting, sort of. Some sculpting and some not sculpting. So I realized that when I was looking at my calendar that today's the first day of Hanukkah, although the Christian calendar, we start the day at midnight, and Jewish people start the day at 6, or not 6 p.m., sundown the day before. So everybody celebrated the first night of Hanukkah last night, but I guess today is the official first full day of Hanukkah, and I'm going to sculpt some lights. Hi, I am Turjan, Julia Trent. People lurking in the background, hello to you as well. So I don't know if we have anyone who is of the Jewish faith or heritage here in the chat. I am not, so I don't feel like I should really try to explain the holiday very much. I mean, my understanding is that it's actually not, hi green users, Bob and Julie, a very significant religious holiday in the Jewish calendar. Hi, long stripy scarf. Thank you for unlurking to let us know that you're lurking. And so it's mainly, it celebrates the rededication of a temple, and an amount of oil that was only supposed to last one day lasted 8 days, so it's considered a miracle. So people light the candles on menorah and stuff, so I'm going to make candles and some other flame type things. And I'll also show off some Christmas stuff. So I'm going to switch over to my other view and put this light on. I've tried to well, my husband did this, my husband's local tech support. I tried to readjust the face camera so that you're not getting as many lights. So there's still going to be glare, but at least you're not going to have lights right in your face. So this is okay, and this camera has decided to bug out, but we can fix that easily. There we go. This is, I found out his real name yesterday, the Gingerbread Knight. So this was sculpted by Christine Van Patten. It's not one of the 12 Days miniatures. It's in this year's Christmas sampler from Reaper. So that is kind of like the Ghoulie bag. It's a gift with purchase, and so if you make an order over $60, you will receive, starting December 1st, let me be clear about that, all of the Christmas stuff starts December 1st. While supplies last, you will receive a bag with this guy in it, and then also the paints Hollyberry, which I used on the red, and Ginger Cookie, which I admittedly did not use because I wanted a very like spicy cookie dough look for the gingerbread guy, because then it would contrast well with his accessories. But I have used Ginger Cookie in the past, and I like it. So if you're interested in a little more about how I painted this guy and the exact colors that I used, there's Christmas wreath on the buttons and then frosty blue on the eyes as well. But if you're interested in all the details, if you go to my site there, the most recent blog post has pictures of him and the full color recipes I used and some information on how I painted him. And some of you can probably guess how I painted him, because we've been doing those dry brush tests of different brushes. And I liked the stipple effect of that one brush, and I thought, well, that kind of makes it look like the speckles that you get in the batter from spices. So I used that brush. I did refine it a little by using a regular brush with a fine point and just being very precise along the edges or other places that I wanted it. But for the most part, I used that one of those dry brushing brushes that I showed in the tests, and I'll probably do one more test. So originally I was going to work on this guy, but then when I realized what day it was, I thought, well, let's go with the theme of the show, which is me embarrassing myself. Yeah. Now, being willing to embarrass myself so that you feel more confident being willing to embarrass yourself and experiment with stuff and try new things. So this is an example of, I made this candle, and then this is a little extinguished melted candle on that side. So I'm going to try to reproduce what I did to make that. I'll probably try to make it like a big fat candle so that you can see it on screen a little better. So it's not going to be exactly in scale if you wanted like a candle like that was in scale with a figure like this, but the principle is going to be the same. You just would scale it down when you do it yourself. So I did it on that one. I did a similar thing on this figure. So the pot was a bit that I had. It was a little metal jar or bottle. And then I made the candle and attached it and then added the dripping wax. So that's another example of that. And I have some pictures of, Ring says my sacrifice is appreciated. Well, I feel like people sometimes don't realize that the pros, or whatever you want to call it, we goof up. We don't automatically know how to do things. We fail all the time. Probably some of what we achieve is due to a willingness to just be stubborn and try again. Hi, Corporia. Yes, happy Thanksgiving to everyone who celebrated that. So this is an example of a little torch that I made. And this is also an example of trying something and it didn't work out that great. So this figure and the previous two, actually, all the figures that I'm showing you today were part of a challenge that used to happen on the Weird Games forums, which was called Iron Painter. So you had a theme and you had 2 weeks to, finish a miniature. And every year it was like people pushed it. So it was dioramas, and then it was multi-figure dioramas, and then it was just more and more. Eventually I had to tap out because I'm way too slow a painter. But it really did push my creativity. So, and I think this one happened in the winter. And I wanted to use, clear resin to encapsulate her. But cure time is affected by the cold. So I was, especially, and then it off gases. So if I wanted to put it in my basement, I wasn't sure it would cure in time, even though it was the last step. And yes, I did completely paint this miniature to a high degree and then covered it. And it's not, as Quindy has pointed out. So instead of using 2-part epoxy resin, I used 2-part epoxy glue with like 5-minute glue that dries in 5 minutes, which when you first mix it and for a while afterwards, it is clear, but it very clearly yellows over time. I made the icicle out of the same stuff. So it has a little plastic core, like I cut off a little piece of blister pack to give it structure. And I had like a whole strip of them, and then I just put the glue on. And that's actually one of my tips that I'm going to share with you when you're doing something like this. If you're trying to make a little torch or icicles or some other little things to put on a base or for a diorama, make a bunch. Then if only 1 or 2 of them turn out, you still have 1 or 2 to use. If multiple turn out, then you have supplies for future projects. So I actually have, I think I still have, I've got a little jar of things I sculpted in this avenue, and I'm pretty sure some of them are extras for him, and some of them are extras for the last piece I'm going to show you. So yes, it ends up looking like she's covered in snot. So the theme, the idea of what I was trying to do is she's an ice witch, and her spell went wrong, and now her little familiar is having to defrost her. I think the theme for this one was sidekicks, so it really was supposed to be more about the dog, the story anyway. And then this one was purple, so I did a scene from the color purple. And the table is just, there's like balsa wood squares you can buy at the craft stores. And then I think the top of the table is like coffee stir sticks. And that I made something and then, printed it out on my printer, because you can, if you, even just in like a word processing program, you can usually see the size of what you're printing. Like it'll show you inches. And so I just scaled it down so it looked like a poster. Bob and Julie are asking how quickly did it yellow? Pretty quickly, I would say within 6 months. it wasn't that yellow, but it started to yellow. Maybe even faster than that. I should look for... See, I do have some pictures, I think. No, I didn't bring over pictures of that one. But relatively quickly. And then I also had another base where I tried to pour Future 4 polish, which ends up being essentially gloss sealer, to make a puddle. And you can really only do that if it's super shallow. Because it starts to shrink. So I made this puddle and it looked great for like a couple of weeks, a month. It looked great for the contest it was for. And then it started to kind of sink in and make a depression and look sort of weird. But this is how we learn. So there's really no substitute for 2-part resin epoxy is what I have learned from my continual failures. Francis said that they did the make multiples to do a self-propelled broom to pick the favorite one for the adventure. Oh, that sounds like a neat thing to make. So this is actually not glued down at this point. So I'm going to take it off. Well, now, I guess this is one of a few rare thing that there is actually something to look at from, top down. But when you, actually, he's not even glued down. So I'll just... and this is all true because this is not technically done. Like I always, in my imagination, thought I was going to come back and touch a few things up. Like I hate how I painted the torch. I like the sculpting. The sculpting's fine. And that's one of the things I'm going to talk about how I did. But I really, every time I see that torch, I hate it so much. How I painted it. The one on that little dog guy came out so much better. So there are some scratches on this because I am stubbornly refusing to put things... Now I think I just should redo the whole thing. But let's take this mummy out of here, actually. So this base also demonstrates... I guess I just did a bunch of cobwebs or whatever. One of the things that I'm going to talk about today, which is... I don't love sculpting. I especially don't love green stuff. So if I can do something without using green stuff, I go ahead and do that. If you're sculpting for production, you need to use something like green stuff. It holds detail the best. It does organic curves very well. And it stands up to mold making. But if you're just making stuff for yourself or bases, none of those things, unless you're sculpting a face or a hand or something, none of those things really apply to what you're doing. So use easier products. So this base is not any kind of putty. It's my art store sells this stuff. It's kind of like a brick of paper mache. So it's like paper mache that's moistened and hasn't been shaped into something. And it would be terrible if we're trying to sculpt anything nice because all of these rough edges, it makes those really well. It doesn't do smooth. Like you can see, this is the product unpainted. You can see there's some little cracks and things like that. So it'd be terrible if I was trying to make something that was detailed and nice, but for groundwork, it's great. So I was able to get this big, brick of stuff at relatively low cost and effort. And I did make 2 of these. I have another one of these floating around somewhere. Should I decide to make another diorama that needs to be on a giant brick base. But I am going to mix up a little putty because the candle is going to use putty. So the other things you're not even going to need putty for. It just occurred to me that maybe I need different sculpting tools than I left out. So this is Procreate, which I actually do prefer to green stuff if you can get it. And whatever putty you buy, if you can buy it like this is also better than buying it like this. So what happens with this is, it's a part A and part B, and it cures when you mix them together. Well, they're joined in the middle, so they are essentially being mixed together. You can just cut the middle out. It's not a huge thing, but it's just something to be aware of. If you have the option of buying it where it's separated like this, that helps. I also keep these in the freezer to prolong their lifespan. But perhaps Bob and Julie can tell us what they would say the lifespan of putty is, because I think it's a lot less than people probably think it is. And all this stuff I'm showing you is like completely ancient, but because I sculpt so little. Oh, and I will. Yes, it's Milliput is not as. So Milliput dries hard, and I have this Epoxy Sculpt. I prefer it to Milliput, but it's very similar. It dries hard, so you can carve it, you can sand it. These putties still have a little flex in them, and that's one reason they do well in mold making, I think. And they will take detail even better than those other two. Not that you can't sculpt a lot of stuff with Milliput and or Epoxy Sculpt. I also have this stuff that I bought it off eBay, so it's not branded, but it's Magic Sculpt. So it's like magic without the C. And then all one word. And then this, I'll zoom out a little actually so you can see this. If you have some sculpting tools that you want to store, like not in drawers and stuff like that, this is a nice little thing. This is a pencil case, and I'm temporarily forgetting who made this. And there we go. Global Art. And they do, I think they have just a single size and then this double size, and then they make super enormous ones. These are really meant to be for pencils. I have some enormous ones for my colored pencil sets that are like 120 pencils. And this idea is courtesy of Michael Proctor, because I didn't think of this on my own. I'm just looking for my cruddy one that's covered in... This is the one I like cut the putty apart with, because it was just super cheap. So I will mix up a little bit of both. I will probably put gloves on. You don't have to put gloves on. The stuff will cure on the gloves eventually. So I reuse them for a while, but they're not reusable forever. So I wouldn't use like really nice gloves. Bob and Julie say they have some raw green stuff from the 80s, but you have to store it correctly. Well, I hope just slapping it in the freezer is the correct storage, because that's what I have done. I know Gene used to have a pluck test for green stuff, but I can't remember which side he did it on. It was like you got a metal tool like that had a sharp end, and it was a particular sound that you were listening for. I feel like it was the yellow. That still seems like it has that. I haven't put brushes in there. I've just used that for sculpting. I don't know. Is this the correct length for our brushes? I would probably let brushes dry out before I put them in here. And it's a little on the short side, I think. I do have some different... I mean, you could make it work. I do have some different brush holder things, but I didn't bring those over. So I just use this for sculpting tools. I have different things for brush holders. So there's a bamboo roll that you can get that's really cheap. And that's fine because it's got little... spaces between the slats so the brushes dry out. And then there's plastic bins you can get that have like foam holders where you click, well, you don't click the brush, but you push the brush down into the foam separators and it holds it in place. And those are not like plastic that seals, so I think they're fine for brushes too. The thing with the bamboo roll is you do have to make sure that you store it with the correct side up. And ask me how I know. We may be doing a show on can I rescue some brushes that got really, really mushed. Green user says separate yellow from blue and store it in the fridge for the longest lasting one. So hopefully I did not separate. I probably got that from Reaper and then was lazy and didn't separate it. This Procreate's pretty old. I got this. This is like how I date stuff. So I got this at the Reaper Con that was like the first or second one at the first hotel. So I don't know, 2015, 2016. Not 2015. I think 2015 was the last one at the shop. And then even once it's not great, like I had some of this stuff. My first batch of this stuff, I got it at Gen Con like a million years ago. And I used it for a really long time. And then a friend of mine bought a fresh package. And when I looked at hers, I realized it just looked so different. Like this was like it had this yellow stuff that had leached out. And, it was getting pretty crusty. And it made a much stiffer mix than what I was getting. But it still worked. Like I was just making bases and filling in base textures and stuff. It still worked fine for that. So what you want is to get them pretty much equal in size. You can mess with it to have something like dry faster or be a little softer. I typically do not mess with it because I'm just making little things and I don't know all the rules about that. Corporea says, one day my freezer stopped working and I frantically tried to transfer my meat, etc., and found about 4 packs of green stuff I'd forgotten I bought. It was hiding under things, so I kept thinking I was running out. Well, you need to sculpt something enormous. Well, you do sculpt something enormous. Hi, Nico. So then you just put them together, and most of them, there's a color difference so that you can see it's homogeneous once it's, it needs to look homogeneous once it's mixed. So I usually twist to get it started. And you can definitely tell this is not homogeneous yet. And I do... So just water works as like a release agent to keep you from sticking to this most of the time. I will admit that I occasionally do use saliva for this. So I don't lick my brushes. I do, if I'm like sculpting, which, I mean, we're going to say sculpting is what I do, not real sculpting. I will occasionally use saliva, but not like I wouldn't use it for the mixing process. That's a little unnecessary. So this is the Procreate. And now it does feel like super slippery because I've used all that water, so I wouldn't want to use it for a sec. Then the other thing about putties that Bob and Julie are going to know way more about is they react differently and they work for different end uses, where depending on where they are in the mix cycle. So like when it's super fresh, it's very sticky and you can add it on to something that you're working really easily, but you might not be able to sculpt this kind of shape or something. And then later when it's cured more, you can do that kind of shape, but then you can't do this other kind of shape. And that's true of all of these 2-part putties. Oh, that's what so I was saying, even when it goes bad, you can use it for what the sculptors call bulking out, which is if I was making like this big thing out of putty, I could put a bunch of old putty in the middle because no one would ever see it, and I don't have to worry if there's like a little lump that shows or something like that. And then I'd put a coating of nicer putty. I'm going to go from this side. Nicer putty on the outside. You definitely don't want to use like your nice knife for this, which I have this whole system of like my blades get downgraded, and then now I kind of never remember which handle is which in the system. That looks muckier. And then dull blades are useful for some sculpting stuff, like sculpting hair and things as well. And then if you were smart, instead of what I did and bought this and just threw it in the freezer, you would, cut it down the middle, take out that middle part that's going to cure, and then separate it into 2 things like this. You can just wrap it with saran wrap or something, plastic bags, and then put it in the fridge. So the fridge, not the freezer, huh? Okay, I've been using the freezer. I have a little shelf in my freezer that is just for catnip and putty. Not mixed together, obviously. So I'm pretty sure that these little circles are not exactly the same size. So I'm going to take some off of the yellow. And that happens a lot with that ribbon style thing. Green User says either the fridge or the freezer. So yes, there's also a hot tip that you can keep your catnip longer in the freezer. So you can see how there's little swirls and stuff. So it's green, but it's not a nice uniform green. So this is not fully mixed. And it is a little easier to tell, I think, with the green stuff than with the Procreate. But I find the Procreate just a little easier to work with. I think it's not as sticky as the classic green stuff. So now it's getting a lot more uniform. If I were going to sculpt like a person or something, I would probably still keep going on that for a minute. But we're just doing some hair. And I'm a little bit sticky now from the stuff. So that's why I often use gloves. Actually, I am going to use gloves. This stuff coats my fingers a lot when I mix it. So typically I would, if I didn't use gloves, I would get up and wash my hands. But I don't want to get up and wash my hands in the middle of the show. And this is why I have the little scoop, because the Epoxy Sculpt, since most of what I do is bases, like I'm extending cobblestones or something like that, I typically use the Epoxy Sculpt because it's much less sticky even than the other two. So the hard putties, the putties that cure hard, are less sticky and easier to work with, but there's some kinds of detail that you can't do with them. But then it's a lot harder to cut, and I don't think you can sand green stuff at all. So there is some advantage to each of them, but depending on what you're doing, you may just need like one thing. I mean, this is all stuff I've collected over like, 18 years or something. It's not that you need to have all this crap. So those are roughly the same. Francis says, I hid some Girl Scout Thin Mint cookies inside an empty Eggo box in the back of my freezer once a year. I eventually forgot all about them. One day I saw the Eggo box while rummaging for breakfast ideas and wanted waffles, but there were no Eggos. That must be like the only time someone was disappointed to find Thin Mints. So there we can tell the non-mixing here. And you can see that it's coming off a little on the gloves, and that will cure and get hard. And I've reused gloves to mix this stuff because, again, I'm just doing bases. If I was trying to make, like, I have sculpted hands once, or, you're trying to replace the face or something on a miniature, or sculpt them a nice smooth cloak, I would probably get fresh gloves and use. So I would maybe also get gloves that fit. But who knows? All right, so I wanted to get the putty mixed up because it may, it may need to sit a little before it's going to be the right consistency for what I want to do. Let's see, Bob and Julie have an opinion. I'm going to roll it into a cylinder. Is there a good time in the putty life cycle to do that? And what I'm going to roll it on is this plastic. So this is cut off of milk jugs, and the putty doesn't stick to these. So if you want to make something super flat, you can put it on here and let it cure, and then it'll just pop off. Now the bottom side will be like very flat. So if you're doing something where both sides matter, you have to... So I just have my little putty off to the side on, and this reflects a lot. So I was going to try to work on here so it would be closer to the camera, but it seems like the light's really dim too. But I might have to go down here as well. Francis probably had cookies for breakfast. I believe at least once a year in having pie for breakfast. I admittedly have not done that this year. Pumpkin pie and whipped cream. I mean, it's 3 of your food groups. You've got a vegetable, dairy, and grain. What could be wrong with that? So I would probably not bother mixing up the Magic Sculpt because it's pretty similar to the other stuff. So what I can't remember, and so I took work in progress pictures, that contest that I was mentioning, the Iron Painter, we were encouraged to take work in progress pictures. And I think there is a wire core in there, and I've built the candle flame off of that. So I'm going to proceed on that assumption and build the candle that way. Greenigo says, green stuff hates me. I have to wear gloves, otherwise I get a nasty skin reaction. Yeah, some people have a lot of problem with resins. If you do like the kind where you mix it together, you might also have problems inhaling it. So I would be careful about that, or using like 2-part epoxy glue, because I mean, they're all slightly different chemicals, so there might be some that you're okay with and some that you're not, but you are not the first person I've heard of who has that problem. So that's something to watch out for if you start working with these 2-part epoxy things. Even though I have super sensitive skin, and I have problems with like soap and stuff sometimes, I've never had problems with the putty because life is weird like that. So this one, I think I did have a picture of it in the construction phase. So yeah, that's what the gravestone look like after priming. So you can't see the different materials that went into it, and that's sometimes you can't tell if something that's made of a lot of different component parts is working until you make it uniform with primer or in some other way. Oh, Kernico, I can imagine that makes the hobby challenging. You have to get a friend that you make them do all that part for you. So I think that's all. Yeah, then we go into Christmas stuff, which I'm going to save for later. All right, so I'm going to get some wire. There's all kinds of different wire you can get. I don't know if I recommend this wire. It doesn't bend much at all. Someone gave me that one. Copper wire is really bendy. So if you want to do something, well, actually, hold on, let me back up. So one of the mistakes people make with sculpting, and boy, did I make it when I first started, is this stuff is like plasticine or plate. It has no structure. So if you push here and then you push here, you just keep undoing what you did. So you have to give it some kind of frame or structure for making a lot of things. So if you're working on a base, you put it on to a base surface and that's your structure. But when they make full figures, they make a little internal skeleton out of wire. And it's the same thing for my candle. We're going to make a little internal structure out of wire. A bunch of different wires. So that bag is like the wire that people gave me or that I found places. These I think I got in the floral section. So this is very fine. If I was making a candle the size of the one that I used on that gravestone, I would probably use this stuff. It might even be too fine for that. And then it'll have a gauge on it. And I think the higher the number, the smaller it is. Let's see if this one has a gauge on it. Yeah, this is 34 gauge and this is 24 gauge. Yeah, so the higher the number, the smaller in diameter the wire is going to be. And this is definitely floral wire. It's a little stiffer than this one. So, I mean, it's pretty much the same deal, but I think I'll use the stiffer one. So I just got those at Michael's or something. And then a couple of them, so I had this friend, and I know you're all going to wish you had this friend by the time I tell the story. So he was like super into all kinds of gaming, like just every single kind of gaming that it was possible to be into, he was into. So he had board games, and he had miniatures, and he had model kits, and I don't even know what else. And he had it in a storage area. But what had happened was all of this was mixed together. So he might have taken the rules or the map of a board game out, and it was in one box, and some paint was in one box, but then the miniatures were in another box, and then, oh, I said I was going to use this green stuff. Well, I guess I'm using this now. So it was 17 bins that were just a complete mishmash of stuff. Like he'd had this great diorama that he'd done, and he just threw it in there. So he kind of wanted to get rid of things. So we brought it over to us, and I spent a significant amount of time going through all these bins and then getting the board games to board game fans. And there's still some of this because the model kits didn't have the instructions for how you put them together. So some of them I just cut up for bits, and some others of them are just sitting in our basement, I think. Creanico says florist wire is really good for building stuff. I've used it to make trees before. So I said I was going to build a nice fat candle, so hopefully you can see it. And this is the Procreate. Now my goal is to I'll flatten it out a little and get it around the wire. I probably want even fatter wire than this. I probably should have got out my paper clip. But I kind of didn't want the wick to look too. I'm just going to put a little bit of water on my hands. And I'm trying to make it smooth. I don't really care what's going on the end opposite where the little wick is. And I also don't care that much if the little wick is too long. I should have made these longer, in fact. Because then I could hold it by the metal part. But what I do care about is whether that join where the two pieces of putty came together is gone or not. And then I'm going to get out some better sculpting tools. I'll try one of these. So the thing I found about sculpting tools is the stuff you can go buy in Hobby Town or wherever, your local hobby store. You're never really going to get things that are as small as what you want. So you learn to make them yourself, or you have kind friends who make you some. Bob and Julie may recognize these. This I found on, I think, Etsy. So maybe they're still there. AM Creatures. It was a set of like all these plain wood handle ones are part of that set. These, another very kind sculptor made for me. But these things are called clay shapers. There's also something called a color shaper. It is softer. So I don't think it's quite as good for our purposes. This is probably the smallest thing I've been able to buy to store. This is called a Wax 5, I think. And then I do like this shape on the other end. I've used that for smoothing stuff out. But I'm going to try and use the kinds of stuff that you guys will find at the hobby store. Oh, and actually, I forgot. I did not do this. But you can kind of make your own. And this is what I started making stuff with. Oh, okay, that one's messed up. If you get toothpicks, and you can strengthen them by putting super glue on the end. So you can sand it down to a shape that you want. So you could say, I had one where I sanded this down so it was really, you know, like a spatula where it really came down to a sharp point at the end and then was a wedge going out. And you strengthen it by putting super glue on it, let it dry, and it can actually last a little while. So I will just use a toothpick because you guys can have easy access to toothpicks. But I will wet the toothpick. So I'm just trying to make this part look like a candle that started to burn. So it's not going to be, you know, flat at the top. It's not a brand new candle from, is that Yankee Candle? Is that the place where you sell the candles? So you can see even with the structure, my wick is now not perfectly centered. I wonder if I can fix that a bit with rolling. So bear in mind, this is something I'm bad at and would normally do with 100% concentration if I were doing it for real. But you can also kind of fix a lot of things with paint. So that's with the Procreate. And that's actually only step 1, and I will do step 1 or step 2 on these, even though in the real world I would wait for this to fully cure before I did step 2. So I will leave this off to the side in hopes that I don't smush it. That's actually the big trick with sculpting, is not smushing what you already did that worked out. Trash says, toothpicks were invented in the South. If they were invented anywhere else, they would have been called teethpicks. Is that right? Well, maybe you're only picking one tooth at a time. I am going to switch to paper clips. So my paper clips are steel. I don't know where to buy non-steel paper clips because steel paper clips are very bad for your clippers. So these are now my paper clip clippers, and then I have a nice set that is for the other stuff. And I keep the nice set in that package so that I remember which is which. Bob and Julie are just in agony watching me be this incompetent. But that's why I'm doing this, so that you guys don't have to feel bad if you try it and you're not super competent. Let's try this, actually. So I'm going to cut off the edge so that I have a nice flat edge before I wrap it around the paper clip. And then I can sculpt it a bit more. I do have, and this I did, no, I didn't get at the hobby store. I think I took a couple of sculpting classes where the fee was kind of high, but it included some tools, and there was like a flat spatula thing, which is very handy for popping stuff off of these things, because this is a little, it's more likely to deform them than my flat spatula thing. So then the seam is the part that I'm most concerned about fixing at this point. So now I am making like a big fat Yankee candle. I guess I could make an even wider one. You can get those ridiculously wide candles. And I'm going to do that same thing where I try to... I mean, that's the nice thing about making a candle that's been used, is it's going to look lumpy and uneven and stuff at the top of the candle. So what could be easier to sculpt, especially when we get to the cheating part that I'm going to show you in a minute for the fire. So I am not going to attempt to sculpt fire with these putties at all, because I would just scream and yell and it would be horrible for everyone. But I'm going to use my cheating method. All right, see, that's the kind of thing that you do with sculpting, is you go and ruin something that was perfectly fine. I mean, you don't if you're Bob and Julie, because they're amazing and magical. So these things, as I was saying, this is a clay shaper. They're knockoff versions of this. When these first came out, I think it was just this UK company, Royal Sovereign, that was making these. Look for silicone sculpting tools on Amazon, and you should be able to find plenty of options that don't cost as much as these things cost. I do think that they're an excellent product. Like, they probably are better than the Chinese knockoff ones, but they are expensive, and if you don't know whether you're going to like sculpting with them, I don't blame you if you want to start with something cheaper. So that was the green stuff, and now this is the epoxy sculpt, which you can see is not that sticky at all. I probably won't even need the water. Bob and Julie point out to use a longer piece of wire so that you can hold it better, unlike my silly way. And actually, that was something I meant to show you guys. I didn't get this out before I started, but luckily it's within arm's reach. So another thing that is pretty helpful when you're making little base bits and doing stuff like that are tweezers. So just the regular old kind of tweezers, I just use those for pulling cat hairs off my miniatures. I'm sure we've all been there if you have a pet. But there are other kinds of tweezers. So these tweezers hold things for you. So they're like reverse. So you pinch them to open. And let's just pretend this was my candle. So when I get to the painting it stage, or if I need to, the part where I'm going to work on the flame, which maybe I will just do on the end of these toothpicks to make it easier to do. And it even stands up. So it's like having a third hand. Sometimes you need to have a third hand, and this is a great tool for that. So this one, the downside of this is it does have, hatch marks or gripper marks in there. So if you needed to put something that was actually part of your thing in there, it could potentially damage it. But they make smaller versions of that as well. And I think I got these in the jewelry section. So these I probably got at a hobby store. These I think I got in the jewelry section of a big craft store. So they're not quite as sturdy, but they are finer. And it's also, if you were trying to glue something to something. Let's see. Let's pretend I was just trying to glue a little. Oh, I do have a little piece of wire from before. Because, you try to put something down that you've got glue on, and then you touch it, and then it's stuck to you instead of the thing you're trying to stick it to. But, so I put a little glue on the end, and it could be a leaf or something like that. And then once I get it where I want it, I release it. I typically don't use these for that. I have a pair of, they're hooked like this, but they're the standard tweezers where you clamp to pick up. They're the standard tweezers, you know what I mean. And then I have another set of these holding ones. Wow, they're grippy. I don't think I've used these ones. I think they came in another set from the jewelry store. So I know people get attracted to those lamps that have the magnifier on because they've got the clips and stuff, but I think it's far better to get something like this because a single magnifier is terrible for what we're trying to do because you have binocular vision, assuming you do. My husband does not, so it wouldn't matter to him. But if you have two working eyes, you want a device that has two lenses. All right, so following Bob and Julie's advice, I bet they're just laughing their butts off, watching me incompetent all over the place. Okay, so my last bit of putty, although I didn't use the whole amount of putty for this, is the Epoxy Sculpt. I'm just going to cut the, you can see it's a little crumblier. So it has advantages and it has disadvantages, just like everything else in life. And I think it actually is going to be ill-suited to this task. I think the more rubbery putties. You see, it probably doesn't stick well enough. Like, you need it to stick to the end of your piece of wire. And this is so not sticky. So the hole is bigger than just being around the wire. And mushing it doesn't seem to be helping with that. So this is why there are different putties for different tasks. So I'm actually going to give up this attempt because we have 2 that worked. And that is enough for the show. And I can still use this paper clip for flames. So I'm going to let those sit just a little longer. They're not really going to be at the stage where they should be for the next step anyway, but I will talk about the flame part. So this is my box of extras, because as I said, I recommend making a bunch of things so that you have some left over. So when I made the torch for the little dog here, where is my great paper? When I made the torch for the little dog, I made an extra. And I know it's hard to see because the flame is made out of a clear material. And for those who might have come a little later, I will get the actual piece back out. So all I did to do that, I didn't actually have that floral wire and stuff then, I don't think. So I just used, I probably used like these things or something. I just tried to mangle my paper clip a little and make it look not 100% straight, which I didn't do on Indy. You can see that his torch was made from a super straight branch of wood. I think this looks like another one for the dog. Yeah, so because the dog's holding it sideways, the flame is going up sideways instead of coming up from the top. And then this was probably a spare from making the one for the Indiana Jones style diorama. And that I did bend the paperclip a little for that. When I was looking at it, it seemed like it was real straight. So I actually made like at least 4 of those ones that I made for the dog. Julie says I'm doing better than Bob teaching painting. He told her to say that. Now you may wonder, what are these? And these are actually the same material. So it starts out clear that I made the flames with. So you can also make like little flame elementals. Or put this in the middle. You know, you could put together a little campfire with some wood sticks and, you know, basing rocks. Okay, that one looks like a poo, but I'm not sure why I made the one that looks like a poo. I think I was testing something. Here I was trying to color the material. So in a sense, trying to make my own clear miniatures. This is like a million years before clear miniatures, but that was sort of what I was trying to do. And I have yet to find a way to make it work. So although some of the materials you can do this with start off clear, even just the tiniest little bit of ink or paint affects them and they become less clear. So I would probably do the same thing as a transparent miniature. I would, if I wanted, you know, I was trying to do like a ghostly transparent flame or something, I would use the transparent material and then paint some light thin down inks or washes onto it instead of trying to incorporate the color into the material. Well, okay, they can make the transparent miniatures with the color incorporated in the material, but I don't know how they do that. It's a different material, I guess is really what the answer is to that. So then I just keep I have like some of these little organizer jars and I keep these. And then I brought out this other stuff because it's topical to the season. So long ago, and I could have brought it over actually, I made a diorama with little presents on it. And getting the boxes to be like perfectly box shaped was a very big challenge for me, even though I was using the stuff you can sand. So these are all made from the Epoxy Sculpt. And again, I made extras to the point where I even painted the extras before I put them on the thing. I didn't end up using any of the ones with the bows. I'm trying to remember what the bow was. Because I didn't make them. Well, did I just... Maybe I stuck like a pointy tool in to make the sort of bow look. And then I can't even remember which thing I did. Oh, I bet it was the little Christmas mouseling thing. Yeah, because I was trying to make them look like mouse bears. So this is, if you type holiday into the Reaper store, it'll bring up, there's a 2-pack of its Santa mouseling and a little elf who's taking notes. And I did a little diorama with the tree and stuff. But this was a different thing, I think. So this one this was probably the same thing. I started with a teddy bear. So that's another way you can kind of do sculpts, is find something that is sort of like the thing you're trying to do, and then just work over it and use that as your armature, essentially. There's another diorama that I didn't bring over because it didn't have fire on it, where there's a mole. I have a mole hiding under a hill. And I didn't actually sculpt it because I was trying to. I started with a squirrel, and I was trying to sculpt it, and I was just so pitiful that Jason Weeby took pity on me and made my squirrel into a mole. But the basic principle, I got the armature part right. It was just the making green stuff not make me crazy part that I was failing at. Corporea points out that Bob's mouseling diorama was pretty awesome, which is 100% true. And Julie says he's better than he thinks he is, which is also 100% true. And they want to paint more this year. Yes, paint more. Have fun. All right, so now we're going to make a torch, and I think I will use one of my little grippy tweezers, because then I can hold it sideways for you guys to see right. But it does help if I grip the correct end. And I would do, as Julie pointed out, I would make it longer and cut it at the end after I had the torch how I wanted it, because holding it would be annoying otherwise. So what I use for this is, I'm going to need different little, I keep all my blister packs and use them for stuff like this, or making washes or stuff like that. So as I mentioned, if I don't have to work with putty, I don't want to. So the ones I showed you before were all made with, this is Woodland Scenics water effects. So if you have a store that sells, and I will zoom this out a little for the products. If you have a store that sells stuff for people who do model trains, you should be able to find this. It will probably cost more than this because I bought this like a minute ago. I have rebought this, and that was, ooh, yeah, I'm gonna have to stir that a little, I think. So when I was talking about, putty going bad, and Bob and Julie were telling us how to make it not go bad, one of the points I wanted to make is people are always worried about their paint going off, or which it can. I mean, I do recommend that you do maintenance on your paint. I have about a dozen metallics that I could restore them, but they're in bad enough shape that I don't think they're worth painting with for what I do. So I'm going to have to replace them. And it's multiple brands. Metallics go off the fastest for whatever reason. I mean, presumably the metal flake makes them heavier. But anyway, if you do paint maintenance, you can keep your paints an awfully long time. These resin products, I mean, when I did buy clear 2-part epoxy resin, which I never ended up using, but it had an expiry date on it, and an expiry date was within 2 years of when I bought it. I've found that within 2 years of when I bought something, like 2-part epoxy, 5-minute epoxy glue, it stops working as well. I've had super glue that stopped working as well. So I've kind of, at this point, I actually write the date of purchase down on my glues. And if I'm having an extra bad glue day, those of you who have watched this show previously may know that every day is a bad glue day for me. But an extra bad glue day, I check that date. And if it's more than 2 years, I just go buy new glue. So the products that we're worried about going, like, people don't ever seem to think that glue gets bad or putty gets bad or whatever, that resin stuff, all of that can go bad. And that's just something you kind of, see, I have goo on me now, so I'm just looking for something to ungoo myself. That's just something you have to accept. And this is why you should make more dioramas than I do, because otherwise you buy this stuff and then you just have to buy it again. So this stuff is old. I'm pretty sure it's going to work, because this is actually not like a resin epoxy or a chemical that depends on a reaction. This is essentially Well, okay, I don't 100% know for sure, but I'm almost 100% sure that this is the same stuff as the art people will sell you. So this is heavy gloss gel art medium, essentially. Acrylic medium. So it's acrylic paint without color in it. So it is going to keep longer. Although, as you see, it was experiencing some separation. And if I'm smart after the show, I will go get a very long stick and stir the whole bottle. So that one is clear because it dries as water. This is flexible modeling paste, which I have to fill small gaps and do some basic basing with. It's very similar. It's not 100. It has more structure, I think. The other difference would be that it is not clear. So if you were wanting to make like your own slimes or whatever, get something like that Water Effects or the next one I'm going to show you, not this stuff. So right now it looks the same, but as the other stuff dries, it becomes clear. And if I start, let's make one torch right now. I'm going to start with the Scenic stuff because it may even be dry by the end of the show, or at least starting to get transparent on the edges. So I do usually use toothpicks for this. But in keeping with the I'm not going to sculpt, so what I want to do is get that little point on there. Oh, let's zoom back in. So I will not be sculpting with the end of the toothpick. That's why I went ahead and got a big toothpick. I'm kind of sculpting with the material. And at this point, I actually just want to get a bunch on there because we're going to have, it's a torch. We're going to have a decent amount of flame. And then I'm just trying to get the points. So I'm using that to create points that look like flames going up. So they say it's for water, but I say it's also for flame. It does not work though to make puddles because I tried that and it'll be full of bubbles and stuff. So I don't like how much that one is poking off to the left. So I'm just going to come back, make sure I have a good peak on my so-called tool and push it up. Maybe I want to make that one taller. And, if I decide I don't like the whole thing, I could just take the gunk off and start over. Because, yeah, I lost my big peak. And that big peak is ridiculous. So basically, that's all I do. I just fuss with it until I'm content that it looks approximately like fire. I'm going to try and make a skinny one. Well, that top one's skinny. So I will put this aside, and hopefully we will start seeing it become transparent by the end of the show. Where is a safe place to put this? I'll put it over here. I'm going to run out of these little tweezers. These are the same things I use for pinning connectors, by the way. All right, so now I will use the flexible modeling paste, which will not turn clear by the end of the show because it will never turn clear. So you don't have to have all of these products. I don't think I realized until I started working with them that this was just like essentially a rebranded acrylic medium. So you can learn from my mistakes. But it's similarly peaky. And these can dry pretty fast. So I actually, this may be almost starting to get too stiff. But stiffness can help with making the peaks. So we'll go ahead and go with it. Getting that first little bit on the end of your torch seems like the hardest part. Because you can see how high you can make it have peaks. So work on the big main peak first. And then these products, if they do start to get really stiff, like your new stuff that you're taking out of the container feels stiff, you can just add water. Because, like I said, they're essentially like acrylic paint. So, like, when acrylic paint gets thick, you just add some water. Probably use the wrong side of that. So, well, no, I'll put out more later and we'll make like little fire elementals. This is light molding paste, which is very similar, I think, to the Liquitex one. So this is This is a sample pack. If you bought this at the store, you'd have to get a big tub like this. My art store has representatives come in from various companies and do demos and stuff. So I've been able to score some more miniature paint or appropriate sizes of things. But if you have friends in your area that also paint miniatures, you could get your own little containers. I mean, this probably isn't airtight, but you could get your own little containers and split this up between you. So even though this will cost $15, if you had 3 friends, then it's just $5 each, and it's more of a miniature painter size of stuff. Well, I guess if you had someone who's willing to act as kind of the go-between, you could do that with more distant friends too. You just have to have one person who's willing to buy the thing and then decant it into smaller containers and then send it out to people. So this is a very light product. I like the kind of standard molding paste better, but I think it'll work for this purpose. So what I'll say about these things when they dry, the molding paste is probably sturdier than the clear stuff because I think it's got a little bit of calcium carbonate or something else is one of the reasons that it's not clear. That gives it a little more structure when it's dry. These aren't super fragile, but if you're painting gaming figures like and you're doing little fire elementals or something, you want to put them on a base so that you're not handling the figure. But on the other hand, I've had these things in this little container and I brought it to cons and done other stuff. It just shakes around there. I packed it and unpacked it and they're fine. And I made those like 15 years ago or something. So maybe I'm wrong, but like the candle flame size stuff, it would probably be possible to bend or pull off the candle flame. But it's way sturdier than like dried flowers or stuff like that. Yeah, this stuff isn't forming the peaks on my tool as well, so I don't think it's as well suited to this particular use as some of the other products. And it's pulling off it's so light that it's coming off the paper clip a lot. Golden has another product that I think is closer to the Liquitex one that I started with. So it's not, I mean, it does still look like fire except for that one that's going completely sideways. But I don't think it's quite as good for the purpose as a Golden product. And I had one more, although I'm running out of tweezers. So this is extra heavy gel matte. And I'm pretty sure this is what Woodland Scenics water is, essentially. So I do kind of want to do this one. This will also dry clear. You can see this is where it dried off from where it was around the little lid. And it is clear. Now the matte, anything that says matte in it is not going to be 100% transparent. So if you want to make things that are transparent and then you paint them later, I would get gloss medium. So this is extra heavy gel matte. I would look instead for extra heavy gel gloss. Oh, it looks like we have a raid from Miniature Stand. Hello, Miniature Stand and friends. I am sculpting torches and candles and flame elementals and whatnot. Sculpting, we're going to put that in air quotes, because today is Hanukkah, and so I thought I would make some lights. Thank you for joining us. So right now I'm using various gel products. So I've got Woodland Scenics water effects and extra heavy, so it means it's super thick. Matte medium. I would actually use gloss medium, but I got this as a sample, and matte medium is what they gave me. Also modeling paste. If you don't care if it's transparent, modeling paste is a good answer. So I made some little torches with those, which is just, I'm using paper clips. If I were doing this for a diorama, I would probably bend it up or use a different thing as the handle of my torches. In fact, why don't I show you some of the painted ones? So there's another whole part of this diorama that I have removed, but that's an example of a really badly painted torch that I made in the way I'm describing. And then I've done the body part of candles and with like green stuff and some other putties like that, and I'm just letting them cure a little, and then I'll come back and show how I do the drips and make the little flames. Although, spoiler alert, you kind of already know. But and then there's another candle flame here. So as I was saying, it's a little, but I mean, I could pull that off if I wanted to, but it's not having a lot of problems. This was a rose that I had made out of dried flowers and dried leaves, and it did not survive going back and forth to conventions. That's why. So there's these weird black spots are the shadow that the flower had cast, because shadows are a big part of what sells a light effect. And then this little guy has the flame on his torch is going sideways because he's a dog and he has to hold it sideways. So that's similar, but a better painted torch than the one that Indy has. And then this is a what not to do. So I was trying to use 5-minute epoxy glue, 2-part epoxy glue, instead of proper 2-part epoxy resin to kind of encase her like she cast an ice spell wrong. And it yellows up pretty quickly. So that thing is years old, but it was yellow, at least a little yellow, within a few months. You can use different gauges of wire. So I've been using paper clips because I'm trying to make sure that people can see stuff. But I have some floral wire and jewelry wire that's smaller. So I would have made the candles with something like this, but the torches I would have made with paper clips. And now I need another paper clip because I already used my 3 torches. My problem is that I've used all my self-holding tweezers. I don't know if I can just squeeze another. Yeah, I'll do that. Also, maybe don't put your hand on your leftover putty or epoxy or whatever this stuff is. Medium, leftover medium. So, and also these are steel paper clips. Don't use good clippers with these. These are clippers I already ruined doing this. So I'm okay ruining another pair, I guess. No, I have a good pair that I don't do that with. Now I squeeze this in when I tested. All right. Do it with the straight end and have a weird looking torch. Okay, so this last substance is the Art Store gel. This is the extra heavy gel matte medium, which I'm certain that the gloss version of is pretty much the same thing as Woodland Scenics Water Effects. Which also means if you wanted to make thick paint, you could, and you have Woodland Scenics Water Effects, you could probably do it with that. So I like to get a good blob on the foundation area. Then what I'm trying to do, look at it from the side, is I want to get a good peek on my toothpick. Because I'm not actually using the point of the toothpick to do this part. I'm using the peak on the material to just pull and manipulate and add additional peaks. And here I'm getting proven wrong because this is not working nearly as well as the Woodland Scenics product for what I'm trying to do. I don't know if it's possible that it started to dry out already. I will get a fresh amount. Let's make sure that is my heavy gel matte. Try to make my peaks again. Yeah, I think it. So this stuff does start to cure really fast because it's essentially acrylic paint, which, as we all know, dries faster than we want it to sometimes. So I would still say the Woodland Scenics works a little better for this, but this is working. Kind of a misshapen flame, though. But as I mentioned previously, you can also cover up a lot of sins with paint. So now I have 4 of these torches. Curing off to the side, and hopefully we'll get to see, they'll cure enough, the little points, so that we can see that it starts, some of them dry in a different consistency than others. So I've worn, this stuff got, you know, this is already kind of hard. So the Woodland Scenic seems like it stays workable longer. So it may be that it has drying retarder in it, essentially. Might be part of why it works a bit better, because all 3 of these other products are drying super quick. Or I would have even said that dries fairly quick. But I will try to do some candle flames now. Where did I put my little candles? Ah, right. So I had made these candles with, this is Procreate, which is, you know, a 2-part putty. It's less sticky than green stuff, so if you like most of the properties of green stuff, but the stickiness drives you crazy, you would probably like this. So it's not Procreate for your iPad, it's Procreate for your sculpting. I do also like Procreate for your iPad. Normally, I would let this cure completely, and then I would trim the little wick wire to be exactly where I want it. But for demonstration purposes, I'm going to start putting the flames on there. Well, and the drips. So with the candle, the difference is you just want one little flame, but if you want to make it look like it's a burnt candle, you want some drips. So I'm going back to the Woodland Scenics. Because that is what I did all the original candles with. I guess it's like acrylic paint. There are very subtle differences in everybody's version of this stuff. So it's kind of a similar thing where I'm using that little peak triangle on the end of it, and I didn't quite, I pushed it down a bit too much. So there's not enough of the wick showing. This stuff is water soluble, so I could wipe it off very easily and revise, particularly if my candle were actually dry. I mean cured. Putties don't dry, they cure. But then what I want to do is get the drips. And I'm going to do it in a similar way. So I'm just going to kind of draw a line. And it's okay if it's a broken line, because candle drips don't always go down in a completely uniform way. Now here you want to avoid this look of peaks because candles don't drip like that. So you just smooth that part down once you've got it well established on the thing. And you could, I mean, if I put this on a plate or something, I could make like drippings on the bottom. But it does a very convincing job because it's, you know, kind of a random application. There's different thicknesses throughout that. It does a good job of kind of duplicating that dripping wax look. You just have to watch out for undesired peaks. Or that's way too much. But as I said, if this were cured, I could also just take a damp brush and brush that right off and just start over on that particular drip. Maybe I'll make one more little small drip. So I feel like I got the actual flame flamey enough. Oh yeah, that's nice. And then I'm gonna have to put it down because I've run out of self-holding tweezers. But it demonstrates the general principle of the thing. Okay, here's my other candle. That is the one made of Procreate, where I did not give myself a handle. And I'm going to use the, I think I'll use the modeling paste for that one. So this, Liquitex makes this particular version. Golden has an equivalent product. But as we're discovering, this is why I like doing these things with multiple stuff on the show here with you guys. These products, while they are super similar, and I would use them for like gap filling and all the same way. This is what liquid green stuff is, by the way. They just put dye in it. I'm almost 100% sure. But it may react slightly differently than this. I had a little bottle at one point, and then because of how those GW pots dry stuff out so quick, then I didn't have one anymore, and I'm unwilling to pay them for paint pots that don't work. So I have not done a direct comparison, but it's a product very similar to this that they've added green coloring to. It is not watered down green stuff or whatever, because as we saw earlier, green stuff is a two-part thing. You have to mix things together, and then you only have a limited working time. So let's actually curious. So it's still pretty workable, but it's definitely a lot stiffer than it was when I first made it. So there are different shapes you could make now. It might, I think it would still stick to the paperclip pretty well to make the candle. But, and then this Procreate is so much less sticky, which for making candles may not be an advantage. But it is also still workable. And this is still workable. I would actually, well, this is getting pretty stiff. I would expect most of these to be workable to like the point where it's the end of my show. But they wouldn't be fully cured for about 4 hours afterwards. Depending on the temperature and whatnot. So this is the Woodland Scenics, and this is the art store stuff. Oh, there's too much gunk on my toothpick. So maybe I'll do the drips first on this one. Excuse me. I actually haven't had much of my tea as I usually would, so I'll take a brief break for tea. So it's got one of those little peaks that I need to fix. But it's otherwise working reasonably well. I do think the Woodland Scenics was a little easier to work with. But now I'm trying to make a short drip. I think I put the drips on the wrong side. I mean, you do want to put the drips on the lowered side of the candle. Like if the top, you've made the top uneven. Yeah, I'm having more trouble with this. Getting it to adhere to the underlying material. But if you already have something like this, I mean, go ahead and try it first. And see if you like how it works out at all before you go buy specific products. Then we'll make a little flame on top of the wick. Maybe. wind a little if I can. There we go. Although again, I just have to put this down on a flat surface because I don't have any more of my tweezers. And then the last thing we can do is make more like campfires or little elementals or something. So here, if I were doing this on a real project, I would put my glob off to the side. Still, I would have something like this. In fact, I can do that because I do still have this. Because so I do the same thing with super glue. So I hardly ever apply super glue directly to the thing I'm trying to glue. I have a little bit on the side and I use a toothpick to put it where I want it so I don't get an excess of the glue. Because if I tried putting this right on the thing that I was making the elementals on, which actually maybe I should use this. So I don't know for sure if this is the same stuff, but acrylic paint, one of the few things acrylic paint doesn't stick to is that same kind of plastic that they make sandwich bags and stuff out of. So I'm not sure that blister pack is that kind of plastic, but maybe this one is, and I'll be able to pop these off real easily at the end. Well, not at the end. These are going to take longer to cure because they're going to be a bigger volume of the stuff. I'm going to get my base going. And if you were going to paint whatever you're doing, this might be one of those things like where I was talking about having a structure where maybe I'd want to make a little, you know, putty core that I could work around because this stuff is so malleable. But if you're doing it to leave it clear, then you're kind of going to have a size limit, and you're going to have to deal with the fact that pushing it here means pulling it there and that sort of thing. Oh, and I'm not remotely on screen, am I? Okay, sorry about that. So you can see where having a core would definitely be helpful for this. Maybe I just need more gunk. I'm trying to get that peak on the stuff that's on my tool. So the peak is essentially my tool, not the toothpick. The toothpick is just delivering the peak to the surface I'm working on. I wonder if I can get like a big one at the top. So less symmetry is generally good when you're making things that are organic and also just for aesthetics. So as creators, we always want to make things symmetrical and similar and stuff, but as viewers, we enjoy things that are less of that. I'm going to take the light down a little. And if you were, you know, if he was, I don't know, inching along or whatever, you could make kind of like flames to show where he'd been coming from. Little flame trails. And then it's all about how you paint it. So that one was made with the Woodland Scenics, which I am feeling is the superior product to do this kind of thing with. But I will have a go with the other products as well and just see where we end up. So I'll use the heavy gel. I'm just going to reuse a toothpick. The stuff on the toothpicks is probably dry by now anyway. So you don't get a ton of working time, but you can get some nice peaks with this. Then let's see. So those are the products that are going to dry clear, and now I'm going back to the products that are not clear, and they do have another material in there. There's something in there that makes them stiffer, because they're for art people who want to do stuff like add like super big textured peaks on their canvas. Instead of having to use all your paint up doing that, you can use this stuff that's cheaper. And then paint the color over it. So it's meant to be fairly sturdy, but I'm not sure that it works on fine detail quite as well as or it's not as controllable. The peaks aren't as controllable as the Woodland Scenic seems to be, but let's find out what happens when we try making a little fire guy. I'll give him a little trail too. And then the last one, which I'm pretty sure will not work as well, is most of the, well, both Liquitex and Golden at any rate. If you're not in America and you can't, or America, Canada, you can't get Golden or Liquitex paints, whoever makes acrylic paint where you live, Amsterdam, whoever, probably has mediums that are very similar to this. So it's like molding or modeling paste are these white ones, and then the clear ones will be heavy medium or gel medium. It's probably good if you... My little container is exploding for some reason. If you can get the air to go back in there, you can usually suck stuff back down. But I'm not having that part is dried. So unfortunately there's enough goop on it that I can't compare it to the one that dried out on the clear product for you. Let's see if I have a toothpick I can use. I was liking the wedge ones for this. I always keep a little container of toothpicks over by my desk for various hobby purposes. And as I mentioned, if you're just getting started with sculpting, and you aren't having much luck finding sculpting tools and whatnot, you can kind of scrape and sand these into different shapes and then make it stronger with super glue. So this one is the light modeling paste, and I think Liquitex has a similar product. This is for people, if you're doing this on canvases, you can imagine that if you put enough of this stuff on because you want like a super textury painting, it's going to add weight to it. So they make like a lighter version so it doesn't add as much weight to it. But that doesn't really matter for what we're doing. I think I would get the regular. And I like this same material to fill in small gaps and, just kind of use as filler for bases, stuff like that. I'll give him a trail too. So those are the flame elemental or magic flames or campfire flames. You could do a variety of things with this. Long Stripy Scarf says, Liquitex is certainly sold in Germany. I assume France too, since it has the French language on it. Well, that is good to know. I didn't know if they were. I know that it's like if I try to buy Sennelier paints or what's the other one? There's a really nice German paint company, and they're a lot pricier here than they would be if I bought them in Europe. And then like the same thing for Daniel Smith is a big American watercolor company. It's the same thing. If you're a European, that's super expensive to buy. Anyway, so those are the little flames. Let's check in on my torches. And of course, I'm not sure I remember which is which. But I'm pretty sure that's one of the clear ones because you can kind of see more of a difference now. So this is one of the opaque ones and that's one of the clear ones because it's starting to dry a little already. And get my other two. And yeah, I would guess the same thing. This is one of the opaque ones and this is one of the clear ones. So even though it's not clear yet, you can see that it's already starting to dry a bit. And we'll check them again right before the end of the show. Okay, the little streaks are dry. So where I made the little wax drips, this is with the Woodland Scenics, and the little candle flames almost dry already. And then this one was made with the modeling paste that is white. And now I will briefly turn to another holiday of Christmas. Well, I mean, some of these are just general holiday miniatures. But all the Reaper Christmas stuff starts up on December 1st. And for whatever reason, I've ended up painting, and Julie and Bob have ended up sculpting a lot of the Christmas stuff. And even though I'm kind of a Grinchy McScroogemas sometimes, it's a holiday tradition now. So I thought I would show what there is and, well, some of what there will be. So this guy is not part of the 12 days. And I showed him in person. I can show him in person again after the slideshow. So he's available in the holiday sampler, which is if you buy $60 worth of stuff, this is added, the holiday sampler is added to your purchase. It also includes two paints. One is Ginger Cookie and one is Hollyberry. I did not use Ginger Cookie in painting this guy. I have used it previously, but I wanted something a little more yellow for my highlights in this one. But I used the Hollyberry on the red candy parts. Also, there's going to be a holiday paint set. Some of them are recurring colors that we've seen previously. So that includes, I used Frosty Blue on his eyes, and that's in the set this year. And I used Christmas Wreath on the buttons, and that's in the set this year. So you can get them as a whole set, but they're also going to be in 4 triad sets. And some of the new paints this year include like a s'mores themed set. So there's chocolate bar, toasted marshmallow, and graham cracker, I think. And I haven't seen those yet, so I don't know. I mean, I assume they're colors that basically match those things, but I haven't been able to try those out yet. Kuniko says he's adorable yet terrifying. That's exactly what I was going for. I was like, if I put that glint in his eyes, maybe he'll look like super fierce. The one I painted was a Metal Master. The one that's included in the holiday sampler is Bones USA. And it is 2 parts. So mine was 2 part. It's at the arm holding the candy cane is a separate part, and then so it just glues to the side. And even though I'm super glue challenged, I did not have any problems with that because there's a little connection. You see where the candy cane is kind of under his belt. That joins to the miniature, so that gives you a second spot. So it should fit really well and glue really well. And I'm not making that up because if you guys watched me try to glue before, you know it's a sad state of affairs. So I had a lot of fun painting him. I used the brushes. We've been playing around with some of the dry brushing on him. So then the 12 days is, during the 12 days, there are 12 miniatures that if you, for every 40, so the Christmas sampler is just per day. If you have an order of $60 or more, you get a Christmas sampler. These guys stack. So for every $40 of your order, you can pick out one of the 12 days miniatures. I'm showing the 9 that I painted since I have alternate views and high-res pictures. I don't think it'd be very fair to the other artists to show like the super tiny little pictures that I would steal from Ron. So this is Julie did these cat dragons and dragon dragons, and you can tell that Julie has had a cat. And I modeled this after my cat, one of my cats, who actually, weirdly enough, he didn't look when we first got this cat, and it was May or something. And then when Christmas rolled around, we're like, oh gosh, this guy's like so energetic and he gets into everything. He's just going to be a nightmare with the Christmas tree. And he like totally ignored it. He sat down and looked at the lights one day, like he got under the tree and looked up like he was looking at all the lights. But he otherwise ignores it because he's like a real hunter and he just wants to chase living things. So since nothing was alive on the tree, he didn't care. He did care about the decorating process because then things were moving. But once stuff was on there, he's like, whatever. But this is the kind of thing he would do. And he would make this exact face. It's like, what? I'm not doing anything weird or bad. Stop yelling at me. So right now on my blog, there's a post about how I painted the Gingerbread Man, or Gingerbread Knight is his official name. My grandmother's cat used to sit in the tree attacking the bulbs innocently. My other cat, and I'm kind of sad she stopped doing it, but she used to crawl about halfway up. She'd just crawl up the trunk and then just sit there. So she'll occasionally knock a little ornament off or something. But now she's too old to want to climb halfway up the tree, I guess, and it makes me a little sad. Then this is one of the dragons. But I was saying about the blog post. So right now, if you go look, there's a post about the Gingerbread Knight, and that won't go away or anything. But I'm just saying if you want to see the colors and some information about how I painted him. But tomorrow, to do it the day before all this stuff starts, I'm going to post kind of like an overall one that will have these pictures, but it will also have links to any blog posts I've posted about painting these guys. So this guy, there's a blog post about how I did you can see there's more light on the right side. So I painted him as if the light source was coming from the right side in this picture. And I show how I did that with the primer and then how I did it with the color paint and then how I blended it. Francis says, the cat dragon and tree is the only Christmas painting I've painted so far. I love the sculpt and I love how you painted it. Thank you, Francis. It is one of my favorites too. I mean, I love all these little dragon and cat ones. Really, I don't think there's one of these holiday miniatures that I haven't enjoyed. There's just, I like holiday figures and these guys are always like super cute and they have a little spark of naughtiness or something. Because, I mean, is that his stocking or is he in someone else's stocking? Do we know? I don't know. And then this is adorable. So this is like a little baby Yeti. And she's got all these Christmas cookies. And actually, I'm glad I remembered to put this one in. So when you buy it, it doesn't have decorations on the cookies. So it doesn't look like there's little piles of icing like on the yellow cookies. And it doesn't have the button dots or the icing lines like on the gingerbread people cookies. The way I did those is what I just showed you. I just used that stuff. And, I smeared it on top for just general icing. And then I just used those little peaks on the end of the toothpick to add the eyes and the lines of icing and the buttons on the other guys. So now if you decide to get this miniature, you can add decorations to your cookies if you want. And then I painted them. Of course, I didn't add color to the material before I applied it to the things. I applied it, let it dry, and then I painted it. 07 Joe Firk says, I have the Snowman Mousings, and they are my second Christmas theme mini, but my only one from Reaper. Those guys are super cute too. I didn't put the picture of them in. They're available all the time, I think, aren't they? So there's the back of this one, and there's a post on painting this one. So here's what it looked like before I added the decorations. So I actually did paint it as it was, and then Ron said, well, can't you decorate those cookies? And I'm like, I was hoping you wouldn't ask that, but sure, okay. And then I figured out how to do it with the material, and I was happier about that than if it was just painting. It would have taken a little more time. It would have been a little more challenging because I would have had to paint in the shadows to imply that it was erased material and stuff, which is certainly doable. It's just generally, I'm like the last link in the chain of these figures, so the sculptors had to have them, the mold makers had to have them. Then finally it gets to the painter. So often these things are being done in a very short span of time so that they are ready to come out for the 12 days of Christmas. This one is called Christmas. So all the previous ones that we've seen so far were Julie, I think. And they're in chat, so they'll correct me if I'm wrong. But this one was Bob Rodolfi. And there's also a blog post on this one. This was around the time when I was doing a lot of, I call it value mapping. So I was using gray, black, and white primer to figure out my shadows and highlights and light source and stuff before I even started painting. So I use brush on primer because I live in a very humid environment. My spray prime days are few and far between. So since I have to use it anyway, I had started using it to work out some stuff, because we're really hard on ourselves. We're trying to do everything at once. And, you know, traditional artists break stuff up. There's the sketch, and they might do a thumbnail to figure out their composition, and then they might do like a little color study to figure out their colors and where they're making things lighter and darker. And we're just trying to do all of it at once on the figure at the same time, and we're setting ourselves up for failure. So by breaking the step out where I'm thinking about the light and the shadows and the highlight placement and stuff, then I can just work on the blending, and which, trust me, this one, white is fun. We all know white is fun. So there was some blending on this, but I'm really happy that I did it, and because I like how it came out, but it was kind of a ginormous pain in the butt while I was doing it. But she's a great figure, and you could paint her in a dark blue and not have to worry about the white. So here's another cat dragon messing with the tree, which I love how Julie implied the existence of a tree without there having to be an actual tree there. Like, he's just grabbed it off the tree. We've all been there. If you've had a cat, you've been there. And then I think there's a picture where you can just see his little face is just the excitement of playing with all the shiny, fun things. Yeah, there it is. He's just like, woo. And this one was so dimensional that I thought a picture from the top was helpful, so you can see like how his tail works and stuff. This is Tinker the Gnome, which was sculpted by Bobby Jackson. And I had a lot of fun with him too. He's just got that, I don't know, Santa's Village little vibe. I just enjoyed him a lot. And I believe he's pretty popular as well, sales-wise. This, I think, may have been, this was the second Christmas dragon you did, Julie. I think Anne painted the first one. And just the way it's grabbing the hoard of presents, like you can just see it. Like, you can see the emotion. Julie did such a good job with that. Long Stripey Scarf says, our cat nicks the baubles off our tree. We've had to switch to plastic because of her. Oh yeah, no, most of my tree decorations are, since I've had cats, since the time I've had Christmas trees on my own. Oh, this one was the first. So I painted the first one, and then Anne painted the second one, I guess. That I buy like stuffed animals and plastic things, and if I have fragile decorations, we've got a few that are souvenirs or that people gave us. They go up at the very top of the tree. So we have to have a clever and adventurous cat to get into the danger zone. So I do have a blog post on this that I will link to in the one that I'm going to share, that talks a little bit about how I painted the snowflakes on the paper. 07 Jofrick says plastic still breaks. Well, this is true, but I don't think we've actually had any casualties. Maybe one, and I don't think it was a cat that did it. I think it was a person that did it. So either when I was putting it on the tree or taking it down. Kiriniko says, right, everyone, we need to convince Ron to commission a full-size cat dragon skull from Julie. That would be pretty awesome. And then these three all came out in the same year, so I was able to take a combo picture. It just gives you a little bit of a scale comparison. So the woman in the middle is a standard Reaper character size person, I believe. And then I'm back to the beginning of the slideshow, because I just threw that in at the end when I was like, oh, I bet I have a work in progress picture from some of these things I was doing. Joe Frick has had quite a few plastic bulbs fall off the table onto the floor and break in half. You can probably glue them. But here's the gingerbread guy in person, for those that didn't get to see him earlier. And I did forget to do this earlier. Here is Sur 4 scale for scale. So he's a good chunky little guy, Gingerbread Knight. And I had a lot of fun painting him. Because I just could use stippling for the spicy cookies, so it wasn't like a big stress blending event like that white dress was. Which again, sometimes the stress blending is worth it in the end. But let's check on our torches again. Yeah, you're really starting to see how the clear ones. So it's still a little malleable, but these things, it's nice because it sets up quickly enough that if you're in a real rush and you're working on a project, if you did this earlier in the day, a few hours later, they would be fine to paint. There's that one. Now the little monster guys, where did I put them? This being a much thicker amount of the material is going to take longer to cure. Like this may be cured tomorrow, but I think it probably won't even be cured tomorrow. I did some tests with this. So this is, I think, on the Reaper site. It's called Mediums, Additives, and Texture Paste So My or something like that. So I think that's on the Reaper channel on YouTube. For either RVE or the ReaperCon that was online. I did a class where I talked about all the products you can add to your paint or that are related to paint. And I had done, since some of these things, the texture matters, I'd done like papers where I did samples of them. And I think they did take more than 24 hours to dry. And it was actually a smaller amount of this. So I think they were touch dry. It was just I knew the stuff that was supposed to be clear wasn't clear in that amount of time. Check on the candles one more time. So that the candle is pretty much good to go because it was such a small amount of that material that's ready to go. With cats, you just have to use plastic to protect everyone from cuts and some silly cats from eating the shards. That is a good point. And Joe Ferk has switched to a fiber optic Christmas tree. Well, that sounds very interesting. We bought a new Christmas tree this year. Because they make the branches now, it's like molded needles. Well, our Christmas tree died last year. It's not that we saw these trees and we're like, oh, well, let's get this now. But so some light strings weren't working and it had a weird smell and it was just kind of a sad tree at this point. So we got this new one that has these like molded plastic branches as well as the traditional cut paper or whatever that stuff is. But the lights are different now too. So they're like little LED lights and they're really worked into the branches and stuff. And I think if one of them goes out, like there's no way to switch them. So I think one goes out and it just keeps on. The rest keep on going. So we're pretty happy about that. But what was going back to the putties from the original. So the green stuff's still like kind of workable. Here's the stage I think where you would mostly be smoothing it. Maybe there's some other little detail things you do at this stage. This is the Epoxy Sculpt and it's very stiff. So these things you don't have a lot of time. So in addition to using like an armature or some kind of structure, you also often need to work in stages, which is the other thing that wasn't obvious to me when I first started painting miniatures and trying to make things for bases and stuff. I didn't know anything about armatures and stages and all that. And so the first few things I tried to sculpt was like a complete disastrous nightmare. It was very frustrating. So in case any of you are under the same misapprehension, I just thought I would pass along those tips. Let's see, we're almost at time. Jofrick said, we took my grandmother's old pre-lit tree and removed the lights. It's still a good tree. Wire cutters and lots of patience went into that tree. Unfortunately, our old tree had a weird, funky smell. And I sprayed it with Febreze until it was soaked. And then I did it again. And the smell bothered me enough that I'm like, nope, I can't live with this anymore. So I don't know if it was the bin that we stored it in or what happened. But my husband didn't want to put up with the lights and I didn't want to put up with the weird musty smell. Francis took the lights off that tree too. I had no idea how much work that was going to be. They wrapped those on so thoroughly. Wow, yeah, I can imagine. But so I just want to let me turn off some of these annoying lights. Say thank you to all of you for coming. I hope some of that was useful or interesting to you. I always enjoy finding ways to sculpt without sculpting. But the actual, I mean, I like this Epoxy Sculpt for doing base stuff. It's pretty easy to use. But let me tell you what else is happening this week. Here's my cheat sheet. And I don't know what I'm going to do next week. Whether I'm going to do something holiday, because I talked about painting the, maybe I won't switch back to this view. I talked about painting the Mistletoe Goblin. So I think I will paint this at some point. So but anything you have, you can paint along with anything you have that you want painted red. But I am also still interested in finishing my fall color scheme elf at some point. So, I don't know. We'll have to, if you have an opinion, let me know in the chat whether you'd rather paint something holiday-ish or keep going on the fall color scheme elf. Which, you know, I can go back to in January too, so it's not a big deal. Thank you, Daka and Kiriniko and Rings and Francis for thanking me for doing this. Joe Frick suggests a mix. Well, I could possibly do that. I don't know if I could switch between them, but I can maybe do like half the show of one and half the show of the other. I will see what I come up with. So every for your streaming pleasure here on the Reaper channel, every day from Monday to Friday, and Forrester paints at 11:30 a.m. That's Reaper time, so that's Central in Texas. Then I'm at 2 p.m. on Monday. Crow's Nest airs at 5 p.m. on Tuesday, and they usually have a fun guest. I don't think I have any hints for who this week's guest might be. Do I? No, I don't think I do. If you want to go back and watch last week, which you can watch, you know, video on demand here on Twitch, the guest was Ron, and he was probably talking more coherently about these specials and whatnot than I was. Then Wednesday is Miniatures Den with Luca, which I think now starts at 1 p.m. I keep forgetting to update my little cheat sheet. Thursday is the Crafty Creative with Josh Foreman. So he's way better at all this stuff that I was kind of doing today. So if you like that kind of thing, go check him out. Queenie points out that the guest on Crow's Nest this week is probably not going to be Avril Lavigne since she got run over by the bus a whole lot last week. So she's probably not going to agree to be on the show anytime soon. Then the show you all love the most is Thursday at 6 p.m. Reaper Live, where you can type #free and get cool stuff. Then Friday is Reaperland at 3, which has a lot of fun community content. And then every other week, which it won't be this week, it'll be next week, is Reaper Errant, where some of the Reaper artists play in a D&D game with Nightheart Gaming, hosted by Nightheart Gaming, and they do really cool tables and have all these painted miniatures. The Trash tormented us this past week with a giant demon lady. Well, there was a demon. I hope you don't feel too sad that we actually shut the door down before we even got to see the demon guy. So that is the other things that are available here on the Reaper channel. Yeah, so last week was the most Reaper show ever. If you are familiar with the not professional thing that we have going on here on the Reaper channel, the last week's Crow's Nest is something that you will enjoy. There were technical snafus and general goofing up and goofing around, and it was pretty awesome. I had a great time watching that. And thank you so much for coming. I'm sure that Quindy will find you guys a raid of someone else who's doing fun hobby type things. And I will see you next week, possibly for a mix of painting things, and we'll see what I figure out how to do. I know I want to show you guys painting right at some point. So I'll sign off now. Have a good day.